Because they were having green underneath.
Exactly.
So good afternoon. I'm Patrick Clawson. I'm the Director of Research and the Morningstar Fellow and Director of our Iran Initiative. And I'd like to welcome you to this event here today. We're in for a special treat. Unfortunately, our colleague Mehdi Khalaji is not feeling at all well today. Mehdi's health is often kind of delicate. But we've upgraded. So you're going to get two for the price of one. And we're going to have commentary both from Nader Uskowi and from me. Nader has recently joined us. He has spent more than a decade working for the U.S. Central Command in various capacities. In recent years as an advisor to the commander of Central Command. And he's still doing that one day a week. While he's here at the Washington Institute the rest of his time, he's taken this leave from the Central Command so that he can work on a book about the Quds Force. And so we are delighted to have him here. And he is going to be commenting about the election campaign and the impact that foreign policy issues have had on the election campaign. And then you get to listen to me. I am by training an economist, and I follow Iran's economy quite closely. So I'm going to talk about the impact economic issues have had on the campaign. But in both of our presentations, and also our third presentations, which is from our visitor, Elham Gheytanchi, who teaches at the Santa Monica College, but she flew in from San Francisco, and I was wondering, well, how do you live in San Francisco and teach at Santa Monica? And she explained to me how the 21st century works, which is all her classes are online. So she could be teaching from Tehran. Well, not probably. But anyway, she teaches at Santa Monica College sociology, and she's written a great deal about Iranian politics, especially about the role of women. So all three of us are going to be particularly emphasizing the question of what role in this campaign has the United States, and in particular, what role has President Trump played. If you haven't been following the campaign, in the last couple of weeks, so I would say especially the last week, incumbent President Rouhani has been facing serious challenges, and the race has really come down to a two-person race. There are two other candidates left in, but it's really Raisi versus Rouhani. And in this two-person race, it's conceivable that Rouhani will lose. In fact, I have my money on it. So Nader and I have bet whether or not the election is going to go to a second round. And I'm trying to scare up anybody who will bet that Rouhani will win, because I'm going to bet that Raisi wins. So if you're interested, the gaming table's open after the forum. Come see me and place your bets. So anyway, the race has certainly tightened some, and it's fair to ask, to what extent is this because of the tougher stance that Trump has taken, and Iranians thinking that maybe we aren't getting the benefits that we expected from Rouhani, and that maybe what we need is somebody who's tougher for tougher times. One of the noted hardliners, Hussein Shariat Madari, the editor of Kayhan, a few months ago, wrote in one of his editorials that Rouhani was the right man for Barack Obama's days, but that what we need now is somebody with more backbone for Trump's days. And so implicitly saying we need someone like Raisi or the other guy who hardliner withdrew, Mr. Ghalibaf. So anyway, you look forward to the treat, and let's start with Elham, please.
Okay. Hello.
If I could ask you to stand up here, if you can, that'd be easier for people to see you.
Okay, so Ian is here to put the
Our sound and light show should start momentarily.
Okay.
Ta-da.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, and I'm gonna try to have an interesting presentation here, especially with all the changes that happened in the past few days. Okay. I just wanted to start with. I'm sorry. I wish I had the computer here.
Yeah, don't talk
Can
about
I-
that.
Emily, can I bring this here and look at it?
Frankly, it doesn't work very well.
Okay.
You just have to
All right.
squint.
Is it possible to put it here? Thank you. Thank you so much. This is good. All right. So,
Can you lower the mix?
yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Just wanted to start with who are they electing? So just a brief overview of the election, presidential election. The head of the government, they're electing a head of a government, or what we call president here, but it has a very contentious history, as you all probably know. It is, okay, let me see. Let's see if I can bring it so I could. All right, I'll let the fine print is not readable, right? You can.
We'll have someone print it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the power of this president or all the other presidents are very much limited. The one thing that we have to remember is that their powers have become more and more limited since the beginning of the Islamic Republic, and so one thing that's important for me when I look at this election is that it's a very important process to legitimize the regime or the Islamic Republic. I happen to agree with Ali Motahari, Namayande Majlis, a representative in the parliament, that the elections are very important in terms of making sure that the Islamic Republic of Iran has a democratic face, and that the people do actually vote and surprises do actually happen. But he says, and I agree with him, that there is not, so I'm going to translate. فرقی بین اصولگرایان معتدل عاقل و اصلاح طلبان وجود نداره. So there's not much of a difference between those who are the conservatives, the ultra-conservatives who are moderate and think wisely, and the reformists. I think during this election, we have seen Rouhani has been expressing more and more of a reformist point of view. You can see that there is, it's not much of a, at the end of the game, there could be, you can argue that there's not much of a difference between them because they both express the same kinds of points. Thank you. Thank you so much. The supreme leader has absolute power. Foreign policy coordination of the three powers and military, Sepah and Basij, are within his power. The election gives legitimacy to the Islamic Republic of Iran. And it's not fair election, let's remember that, by international standards. Candidates are vetted by the Guardian Council and the Supreme Leader. Now, this time around, there were 6 out of 1,600 that were approved, and as of today, 4 are in the race: Rouhani, Mir Salim, Hashemi Taba, and the Black Turban Raisi. The Black Turban is important because he is the descendant of Prophet Muhammad, and he has that in common with Supreme Leader. Now, minorities, albeit Sunnis, Kurds, women, have not been candidates in the past 38 years. And I just wanted to remind you all that Ms. Azam Talaqani is a female candidate who has consistently been applying for the job but has never been qualified because she was a woman. And there's this whole debate about Rojal Siyasi. They argue that it's only men, and women have been trying to say, no, it also refers to women as well, but has never materialized. Now, the election does reflect a tension. It always has, so nothing new here. And Khamenei's ultra-conservative represents the ultra-conservative faction, and this time around Rouhani has risen to embody the hope for reformists. Raisi is to the right of the political spectrum and is expected to be the next supreme leader, maybe. I think his job would be much harder if he doesn't get the majority of the vote in the first round. Mir Salim is close to Rouhani. Hashemi Taba is the independent guy. It's always been as far as I read on him, he's been in the sports and so forth. And these two are not expected to win. Now, the focus of this presidential campaign have rightly been the economy. And Rouhani has been trying to take credit for his dolat, or government, for nuclear deal, and the fact that more sanctions were not put on Iran, and the nuclear deal was supposed to boost the economy, but it hasn't. Raisi, his followers are 1/4 of the voting population, who always follow the supreme leader for ideological reasons. His targeted audience, I think, is working class and rural population. He talks to those who are struggling to make ends meet. Now, Rouhani, rest assured, he also has 1/4 of the voting population due to ideological reasons, because they want reform. His targeted audience is, as of today, all reformists with the backing of Khatami, and the minorities, Kurds, Sunnis, Baluchis, and you can argue women. Did I? Yeah, sorry. Raisi, and before him, Ghalibaf, who decided to back off, have said that Rouhani promised negotiations with the West will result in better jobs, and who is benefiting then? Let's, there's somebody who's benefiting, and these are thieves in our economy, and let's go get them. And I always thought that this is such a popular slogan, because in the Iranian elections, whenever you say there is a thief, people agree there is. There is somebody or people who are taking money away, and there is injustice, economic injustice, definitely. And there is nepotism, bribing, inflation, and a growing gap between the poor and the wealthy. And there's this Mahzar campaign that happened. Don't know how many of you guys were following that, but I thought that was interesting. That really represents this tension about there are thieves. There are people who are where they are because of bribing and because they've been taking money away, and it's unjust. So Bijan Namdar Zangane announced that he's willing to exchange all his belongings with that of Ghalibaf, and then Ghalibaf announced that he is willing to give up all his belongings in exchange for Rouhani's house. So this is, I think, reminiscence of the camp of Khomeini's sayings that, if you come from the mustazafin, or the poor, you stay true to the poor, you never live in a wealthy house, or you never have a wealthy lifestyle, and you don't collect money for yourself, and so forth. So there is that. There was that tension in the campaigns too. Now, on the surface, it seems that economy is the main factor, but I think foreign relations, or as Iranians call it, ta'amul, with West. And ta'amul is an interesting word in Persian, because I think it means interact and come to a compromise with, all in one word. And frankly, I think this is a word that was coined more in the reformist era, ta'amul with the West. So you interact, you exchange, and you come to a compromise at the end. It doesn't end in animosity. With West is also very much present. Rouhani is not allowed to make a big deal of it because Supreme Leader has specifically said so. Recently, Rouhani has seized any opportunity he gets to point out that due to Barjam, the nuclear deal, one, Iran is no longer isolated. Two, there is no threat of war against Iran so far. And three, economic boost is underway, foreign investment plus more employment, although you haven't seen much of it, but it's coming. And he knows, everybody knows that people are disappointed, but he's saying that it is coming, but the pillar is the foreign relations. Now, ways in which economy is tied to foreign relations is more jobs with foreign investment and improving infrastructures and security in Iran, and the region is crucial for successful economic growth. And that, I think, has been a present theme in the campaigns. Nationalism, I want to say, is very much live in this election, and Iranian pride is to be protected, and all candidates vow to preserve Iranian national security. So the tension is again between those who assume opposition to Supreme Leader is an orchestrated fitna led by Western powers, or as Khamenei has said, by that Zionist filthy man, meaning George Soros and people like him. He said that, I think, 3 days ago. So that tension has been surfacing too. Now, if I can make a segue here with permission of my other co-presenters here, city council elections are happening at the same time. It is not advertised as much because the political elite in Iran want to render it ineffective, marginal, and without security measures. They don't, in other words, they don't want any demonstrations to happen. They don't want it to become a big deal. But I think more cultural and political change has been happening at the level of city councils. More women participate and are actually elected, and it is grassroots change in local level. I remember seeing and I'm sorry I don't have the picture, but I think if I ever have another presentation, I will definitely make it with pictures. But there was a picture of one woman with 7 other men in a mosque in a city, the border of Iran and Afghanistan, who was running for city council elections. And she had a great chance of winning, as Top Knock predicted. Top Knock is the publication by Rezai, Mohsen Rezai. And I think that is an interesting, you never see it for presidential election, but you definitely do see it for city council elections. And it's something that is unfortunately not talked about a lot, but it is very important in Iranian politics, and it's becoming more and more important. Now, who are they elect? Okay, sorry, I come back to that. So let me just say, I wanted to end it with what I have seen in terms of the foreign relations. I think there is a one minute. I think the candidates in the Iranian election have not consciously, and it's a deliberate decision, they have not been talking about Trump because there is a great uncertainty. But you can see the fear and the way in which the uncertainty that rules over or has overshadowed the campaigns. I think there is a lot of concern among the population about whether or not Iran can walk in the path that it has been walking, staying secure in a region that is increasingly insecure now, I think Rouhani is saying that he is a man of progress, he's a man of making deals, he's a man of making sure that Iran will never come into any taqabul instead of ta'amul. Taqabul meaning there would be any aggressive acts and in the waters or on its borders, and they would have to take military action. I think he has presented himself as a mard of ta'amul, interacting and coming to compromises with international community. And Raisi and Khamenei, I think Khamenei, who's backing Raisi, they've been saying that it's not because all the credit should not be given to Rouhani. It's because the population of Iran has been steady and and have been ready, and they've been in the Dar Meidan budand, have been yes, they have been present. And Raisi, I think, is trying to mirror the tough act that Trump is putting out. So if you look at it as a performance, as a political theater, I think Rouhani is continuing with the image that he had before, saying that no matter who comes to power, I will be the man of ta'amul, not taqabul. And Raisi is, I think what I see out of his campaign and the backing that I see from Khamenei is more a man of taqabul, that if they confront us, we confront them, and we certainly have the power, and we certainly have our proxies all over. And in terms of the Houthis in Yemen and Syria, their involvement in Syria and Iraq, I think Raisi would be the man who would say that we have the power here and in our proxies to confront any aggressive act. So with that, I conclude, and I hope to hear your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in the 2013 presidential election in Iran, the economy was also the main issue. And yet that similarity, in that both campaigns focused very much on economic issues, masks an underlying dramatic difference, and frankly one that I had not particularly anticipated before this campaign began. And that is that in 2013, the economy was constantly framed for all of the candidates, and this came out very clearly in the very sharp exchanges in the debates, and also lots of articles and lots of public rallies. The economy was framed as really a byproduct of foreign policy. And the economic problems were presented as the failure of the Iranian government to grasp the outstretched hand of Barack Obama. And that there was an opportunity here for Iran to improve its economic situation by working with Obama, and that by contrast, the argument was that the hardline government had completely blown it. And that argument resonated. And so that Rouhani's argument that the way to solve the economic problems was to end the sanctions, and the way to end the sanctions is doing a nuclear deal, I mean, that was not just Rouhani, but every candidate except Jalili put forward that argument. So the economic argument about how to move Iran forward, create jobs, bring prosperity, was presented as really a byproduct of the foreign policy debate. And so that while I won't say that the 2013 campaign in any way turned on foreign policy, it turned on the economy, and the economy was framed as a foreign policy issue. Well, I expected much the same thing to happen this year. That is to say, I expected before this campaign began that the critiques of Rouhani would have been, well, you promised us a better economy and you haven't delivered, and that just shows that you had this naive trust in the outside world, in the West, and especially the United States, when they actually had no intentions whatsoever of ever delivering on their fine promises, and you were a fool to believe them. And that in fact, what we need is to be entirely self-reliant. And so I expected the critics of Rouhani to go charging ahead in their criticisms of the nuclear deal and their criticisms of the Obama administration for not lifting sanctions. And that would only become reinforced with the Trump administration, saying, see, look, we told you all along that Americans are not interested in improving relations with Iran. Trump's election proves it. Well, there's been a teeny little bit of that, but only a teeny little bit. And the way that's come out has been mostly in terms of, well, what we need is a resistance economy. That's the way to improve things, is that we need to be self-reliant and we need to develop our own resources. And that's the way we can improve things. And there has been that element, which frankly actually has some truth in that Iran's problems are more homegrown than they are caused by the outside world. But the main theme, and the thing which has caused some remarkable mudslinging in the last presidential debate, which, let me tell you, it made the exchanges between Clinton and Trump look very modest by comparison. The mudslinging has all been about corruption, injustice, and inequality. And allegations of corruption have been levied by each of the candidates against the others, almost all true. It's all been paired with complaints about injustice, which have rung home, right? In this way, it was much more reminiscent of Ahmadinejad's first presidential campaign, where he had a particularly effective campaign ad against Kalibov, then is now the mayor of Tehran, the guy who withdrew the other day. And so this campaign ad showed the beautiful Kalibov mansion and the magnificent swimming pool and the wonderful palace of the dining room and so on. And then you came to Ahmadinejad's house. And the ad, they're asking Ahmadinejad's son, so where's the swimming pool? Just, right. You know, and, oh, that's your car? Because it was a really beat-up old car. I mean, I like beat-up old cars, but nothing to Ahmadinejad. And so that was much more this campaign. It was much more, this campaign was about corruption, injustice, and inequality. And there was very little discussion about opening to the outside world. That was just not the big issue. I mean, I said 4 years ago that the big issue is, do you want to join the world or don't you? And that was really the question on which the presidential campaign was fought last time. And it's not been the issue this time. And there's been very little blame put on the West for the country's economic problems. I mean, when blaming the Rouhani team for the country's dire economic circumstances, which they exaggerate, the economy's actually okay, not great, but okay. The critics have focused much more on mismanagement and corruption than they have on naive trust in the West. And so that, I think, has surprised me. And it suggests what, a large extent, the issues in this election, as in most elections in most places around the world, are local. It's not foreign policy, and it's not the foreign policy. You know, when foreign policy comes to the fore in an election, it's an exception rather than rule. And the reason it came to the fore last time was because Rouhani and not only Rouhani, but the Iranian people as a whole, tied the issue they cared about, namely the economy, to foreign policy. They weren't interested in foreign policy for itself. They were interested in foreign policy for what it could bring. Well, if that was a big surprise to me about how really the United States has not played in this election, and certainly Donald Trump has not played in this election about the economy, I was even more surprised to see that there's been quite a lot about social and cultural issues. And there's been quite a lot done about complaints about undue interference with educational institutions and complaints about restrictions on women and the classic why can't women go to sports events kind of things. There's really been quite a resonance about those issues with rather little pushback from the conservative crowd. And again, I found that surprising because been such a hot issue for Supreme Leader Khamenei that I would have thought it was dangerous to raise this, because he, in fact, has spent much of his professional career warning about the risks of cultural invasion from the West and being very upset about it. And that's an issue on which there are a lot of conservatives in Iran, social conservatives in Iran. You know, it's not just this country that has social conservatives. A lot of Iran's social conservatives who can be rallied to vote for the conservative side by these sorts of concerns about West-toxication, about Western cultural invasion and the like. And yet we saw very little of that. We saw very little of that. Also, intriguingly, to the extent that we were going to see discussion about social and cultural issues, I would have anticipated that we would have seen quite a lot more about Iran's rightful place in the world, and about how the West doesn't recognize Iran's rightful place in the world, and doesn't recognize the glories of Iranian culture. And certainly Trump's travel ban seemed ideally suited for those kinds of nationalistic complaints. And nationalism has become quite a powerful force in Iran, has always been an important factor in Iran, but in the last 4 years has been really gaining remarkable resonance. So the Islamic Republic, which started out life being very uncertain about nationalism because it was the Islamic Revolution, in the early days of the revolution, there was talk about destroying Persepolis, for instance. Now what we see is this fake holiday of Cyrus Day, in which hundreds of thousands of Iranians show up at Persepolis to glory in the ancient culture and traditions of Iran. But there were hardly any criticisms of the travel ban, and really remarkably little complaints about Trump's rejection of Iranian culture and Iranian society. So I would say that this election in Iran is a wonderful example of that old adage of American politics, that all politics is local, and that whatever happens on Friday, it's not about us, and we have not really particularly influenced what's going to happen. With that?
Patrick is really tall. We have to bring this. Today is the last day of the campaign, elections campaign in Tehran. Tomorrow nobody can campaign. Friday is the voting day. So they started with 6 people, 6 handpicked candidates to run for president. But those guys are dropping like autumn leaves. And when I heard that Jahangiri dropped out of the race too, I said, oh my God, I'm going to lose my bet to Patrick. Because it's going to be Raisi versus Rouhani, so we are not going to go to second round. The first round probably is going to be the last round. And the elections are really surprising in Iran. I mean, it's always been. Goes back to Khatami's election. I remember about just a week prior to Khatami's election in 97. His main competitor was Speaker of the Majlis, Nader. And he had chosen to go to Moscow for official visit just a few days prior to elections. That's how much he thought that he could win an election. I was in Moscow on that day. And then I don't speak Russian, I understand Russian. I saw all the TV in Russians that are showing him coming in on a red carpet to go to see the prime minister. And I said, okay, if the Russians are treating Nader like this is sure winner. By the time I get to Washington, Khatami was president of Iran. And that's only a matter of a few days. Then it was the surprise of Ahmadinejad, the biggest surprise probably in any of these elections. And Rouhani too, to a large extent. People at least did not expect Rouhani to be the winner in the first round. if at all, to be the winner. So it's very difficult now between these two to predict exactly who's going to win, although we are really getting close. It's Friday. In the last couple of days, what I'm noticing is a massive push by the hardliners to frame the elections in a revolution versus traitors to revolution kind of a discourse. The Kayhan main headline today, and the Fars news agencies repeated stories in the past few days, just showing that Raisi is the one who is going to actually uphold revolutionary standards in the country, and if Rouhani is elected, basically they're saying he's elected, revolution will be in danger. And interestingly enough, Rouhani is also framing, aside from the economic, social issues, which I agree with both my colleagues that are the main topics of the elections, but when it comes to revolution, he also is taking a very hard line. As a matter of fact, today he just said that the elections is electing between war and progress. And that's huge in Iranian politics. When he says between war and progress, he means between the revolutionary forces and the moderate forces, because those are the ones who wants to go to war. But aside from that, aside from this general presentation about war or revolution versus moderation and all of that, you don't see hardly words spoken by the candidates on foreign policy, on regional policy, on military policies. Although the country is at war, today's Rouhani is the first ever in this campaign a reference to the wars that are going on, saying that this is between war and progress, and trying to appeal to if there is any anti-war sentiment in the country, which we haven't seen it openly. Whom he's appealing to, probably not so much to anti-war sentiments, but equating war with the hardliners, and from that point of view, going after the hardliners. Hardly any words spoken about this foreign policy, or Trump, or U.S. relationships, except in a very, very general ways that, especially from the hardliners who keep saying that they want their independence of Iran to be the top issue, meaning anti-U.S. Move. The day after the election, most probably Saturday, things are not going to change, guys. Presidents of Iran do not have authority over foreign policy. Presidents of Iran do not have authority over regional policies. Presidents of Iran do not have authorities over military policies. All of those major foreign military regional policies are basically drawn and led by the supreme leader, by the revolutionary organs, Justice, IRGC, the Quds Force, and really by design of a very complex dual political system of having a generally elected presidency and majlis and city councils, as Elham mentioned, putting that side of the country, that side of the government in charge of day-to-day management of the country, and the revolutionary organs, the supreme leaders, his office, Justice, IRGC, and the Quds Force are really the guardians of the revolution. Hence, all of these things about upholding revolutions and saying that Rouhani cannot possibly do that. And so the day after elections, as far as the issues that most affect the national, the security interests of the U.S., of our allies, of the region, we are not going to see much of a difference, although they're going to be, if Raisi wins, you're going to see more of a hardliner tone coming out. But it's not really going to affect the policy is already there. And the Office of Supreme Leader is the organ that actually runs the foreign policy, military policies of Iran. Still, for the reasons that my colleagues mentioned, elections matter. The president does have some effect on the economic development of the country, which is a key to the stability of the country. And we do want to have a stable Iran, not an Iran that is going to be as unstable as its neighbors, some of its neighbors. So in that sense, yes, it is important to have more moderate president who pay attention more to those economic aspects, Rouhani versus Raisi. On social issues, on a lot of these number of issues, it does matter to the people, but I don't think on the issues most affecting our interest. So if Raisi doesn't win Friday, with all the propaganda that is coming out of the pro Khamenei's newspapers, the news agencies, and all of that, that would be a symbolic loss, a serious loss for the Supreme Leader if Raisi loses. After all these things they've done in the past, especially in the past 2 or 3 days, and doesn't mean that a win by Raisi, loss by Raisi is going to change our foreign policy, regional policy. As I said, that those are not going to be affected, but it's going to be another blow to the Supreme Leader that they just don't have enough support, that they could not even pull off a win for Raisi after all the things they've done in the past few days. Thank you.
So now I get to ask a first question, privilege of being moderator. And so let me ask each of the panelists, and I'll chime in too, how should the U.S. government react to the election results? Let's suppose Rouhani wins. Let's suppose Raisi wins. How should the U.S. government react?
You want to go first?
No, that's okay.
And pull the microphone down right in front of you if you could.
I think it's for the sake of the security of the region and what is happening at the moment, both in Washington and in Tehran. I think recognition would it could be effective, and then also I think what they seek in their foreign relations, no matter who wins, Raisi or Rouhani, is mutual respect. So if they can see that signal from the U.S., then they would. The negotiations can still go on. We'll have a future, and we can. And the international community can be more certain that they can have their provisions in effect in Iran, and can follow the nuclear deal to make sure that nothing is out of the ordinary, and the nuclear ambitions will be there. But I think giving recognition to the next president will allow the international community to put a cap on it and at least keep it under control, and for U.S. to have more negotiations if needed.
I believe the U.S. government should continue at even much higher level a working relationship with the government in Tehran. I do not believe we have to cut our relationship with that country. JCPOA was a good starting point to establish that kind of working relationship with Tehran. In my view, we have to distinguish between the government in Tehran and the rise of the Shia militancy in the region. Those are two different trends. And I think this administration at least in the first signals we are getting from the administration, understands the difference between the two. And so even if Raisi wins, my hope is that Washington would continue strengthening the working relationship with Iran. We did that in Soviet Union times. We had the largest embassy in Moscow. At the same time, the U.S. was the leading force against the communist insurgencies across the globe, and we didn't see any contradiction between those two. That kind of a balancing of diplomacy and confrontation is what we have to follow with Tehran. We have to have a working relation. We need a president to negotiate future JCPOAs if those comes up, or those kind of relationship. But at the same time, we have to realize that aside from what the government in Iran does, we have a rising Shia militancy in the region, which is a real threat to our interests and to the interests of our allies, and we have to counter that. And I think we can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
If I may just chime in, what I would love to see, but what frankly I don't expect, is I'd like to see the United States government issue a statement criticizing the elections as being unfree and unfair. Because the vigorous competition that takes place between two candidates can mislead people into thinking that, oh, gee, that must be a free and fair election.
Correct.
Especially if the general opinion is that the votes were fairly counted. And yet what makes Iran's elections unfree and unfair is everything which happens before that stage. Sometimes it's also what happens after the ballot boxes are closed. But what happens before that stage is inherently unfree and unfair. The whole restrictions of the Guardian Council and the tight restrictions during the campaigning period guarantee that the result will be unfree and unfair. This is not an administration which particularly is noted for caring about things like that, and they're kind of busy doing other things with the president traveling. So I frankly, it would be kind of hypocritical while you're in Saudi Arabia to complain about somebody else's unfree and unfair elections. Elections in Saudi Arabia are, well, leave that unsaid. But anyway, I do not anticipate that that's going to happen. So now to your questions. Bilal, I saw a question in back.
Thank you very much. I'm Bilal Wahab from the Institute. I have two questions, if I may. Khamenei's health is not good. So does that mean that the next Iranian president will be more consequential because he'll be overseeing a transition of the Grand Ayatollah? And if this is the case, how would the Rouhani-Raisi play out in your anticipation? Two, we've heard that many of the minority groups, Arabs, Kurds, some Turkmen, some Sunni parties boycotted the elections. What is the impact of these boycotts, especially when it comes to the point of being free and being fair? Thank you.
If I may add to that first question, I'd like to hear your thoughts on if Raisi loses, does that mean that can he be supreme leader, or has his chances gone? And if Raisi wins, does that mean that he's pretty well guaranteed to be the next supreme leader, or is that still in doubt?
Completely irrelevant, if you ask me. Because, to a reasonable person, it's doubtful that when somebody doesn't win the majority of the vote, he can be the supreme leader of a country, right? But Velayat-e-Faqih has nothing to do with popularity in Iran or in Shia religion, if one can say that. Because Velayat-e-Faqih means absolute rule, guardian, somebody who goes above the popular vote and the population. So by definition, it doesn't mean popular vote. But I think, for people who are watching the region and the election, it might create this perception that, if he doesn't win, how can he be the supreme leader? And that's the paradox of the politics in Middle East or in that part of the world. but we had to deal with that question, your first question, 4 years ago as well, because his health was not good at the time either. But now this time around, I think it is very important because there are going to be major decisions about who will take his place. And yes, that would be consequential. I think Rouhani and if Rouhani is elected and if Rouhani becomes the next president, despite what we see now, he would agree with succession, and Raisi can have his way into the Supreme Leader office. In terms of, I leave the second part of that question, the boycott of the Sunnis. There are always groups and ethnic groups especially who are boycotting. And I think this time around, Rouhani it was interesting in his campaign that he was addressing the minorities, the ethnic minorities, I thought more than 4 years ago. And I thought that was because he was, he was addressing those boycotts. He was actually talking to them as well. And that's another way that you can see that Rouhani is more concerned about the national security and the security and making sure that the ethnic tensions don't rise up and so forth. That's his way of reassuring that there is not going to be fitnas or uprisings of any sort. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
If the minorities boycott elections, it's going to be a great blow to Rouhani. Rouhani will not become president. He cannot win the presidency without the vote of the Kurds, Baluch, the Arabs. Because last time he won those votes by close to 100% of those areas, those regions. Those regions necessarily, when a Kurd or a Baluch or Arab in Iran votes for Rouhani, doesn't mean Rouhani is the champion of their cause. They're voting for the least bad between the two choice. They don't want to vote for the Islamic Republic, a Shia-led revolutionary candidate. So yeah, that's going to be a good. Now, I've heard about these boycotts. I've read it. As a matter of fact, this today in a couple of Kurdish journals. How much are the rank and file on the ground will listen to those boycotts? I'm not sure. I think they're still going to see and usually those states, those provinces vote in a very high percentage. Usually the turnout is very high in those. So I do expect they do vote, but Bilal, if they don't, that's the end of Rouhani as president. On Khamenei's, I don't have much to add on the health issues, except that we only had 2 supreme leaders in all these almost 40 years. The first one was elected by God. But the second one was a president. He actually ran for presidency and actually won the election. So if Raisi loses because of that precedent, I find that although the group of Shia clerics who are going to choose the next supreme leader, although they can choose anybody they want to, but I find it very hard for them not to take into account the sentiment of the people that they voted against Raisi and still go ahead and select Raisi as supreme leader.
Okay, I disagree.
I know you do.
Finally, got to do this.
Welcome to this institute.
Here in front. There's a microphone coming your way so the people in back can hear you.
Okay. I'm Joe Monfil at the School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason, former Foreign Service. How much does the fact that Raisi, in a dramatic sense, there's a lot of blood on his hands, having presided over trials that literally executed a large part of a lively population shortly after the revolution. Does that have any impact on the thinking almost 40 years later of voters?
Yes, I think it has. And the reformists, those who follow Khatami's lead, the progressive forces, people who followed the green uprising, I should say, yeah. Yes, absolutely. There are people who actually, and I'm sure you know that the tape came out, and Montazeri has actually referred to this to the historical incidents in which he thinks that people like him are responsible, as you said, for the massacre of the opposition. I shouldn't say opposition forces, the critics of the government, and the political prisoners and so forth. I think that is very live in the memory, and it has become more of a present issue by those tapes that the son of Montazeri put up on the social media, and people did listen to it. But in terms of him being supreme leader, no, I don't think so. Because I think the revolutionary, the ultra-conservative, the social conservatives, those who follow Khamenei, those who believe that the principles of revolutions have to be upheld, probably do think that he did the right thing and he was one of the founders, and they're very much against Beit Montazeri. Although Beit Montazeri has also published their, they have said that we do not approve of Raisi. The Rajai family also has said that we don't approve of any reference to Raisi that represents him as in any way similar to Rajai. Beheshti also as well, the Beheshti Foundation, I think they have. They said, we do not approve of any kind of parallels between Beheshti and Raisi. So yes, these oppositions are there. They have been advertised. That people do read them, even though they're not in Kayhan or Seda or Sima. But I do not think that this has anything to do with him being the next supreme leader. I think the Khamenei is very much backing him, and he could very well be the next supreme leader, as expected. And he is young. I read he's 56. So those years, he was the beginning of the revolution and so forth. He was 20, and then when he did preside over all those the massacre, he must have been 26 or 28. So with that being said, he's young in terms of being a supreme leader, but I think it will have nothing to do with him being the next one. In fact, it would be one of his credentials, because he would be perceived as the one who was one of the founders and kept the way and didn't go astray.
I would just comment that there's still a lot of affection for Ayatollah Montazeri, who was the longtime designated successor of Khomeini, and was in many ways the positions that he took after he was dismissed from that position by Khomeini resonated with quite a number of devoutly religious people who were not sympathetic to many liberal reform. And Montazeri described that episode that Raisi was so involved in the 1988-89 killing of dissidents as the greatest shame of the Islamic Republic and an historic stain on its name. And what we have seen in the debates in the last couple of weeks is there are a lot of people who agree, and that it was entirely unnecessary. it's one thing if it had been widely perceived as necessary to preserve the revolution, though many people might have said this was an unfortunate necessity, but that's not the popular attitude, and then the popular attitude is correct. I mean, it was just an act of blind vengeance. The episode in question was at the very end of the Iran-Iraq war, the Iranian forces really collapsed, and Iraqi forces advanced into Iran, facing no real opposition. And at that point, Saddam rather cynically encouraged the Iranian opposition group, the Mujahideen Khalq, to saddle up and to advance into Iran. And the Mujahideen were stupid enough to fall for this. So they indeed advanced and more than 150 miles into Iranian territory before they were stopped. And that rattled the authorities in Tehran greatly, but frankly, the Mujahideen had no lasting capability to act, and once the reserve forces were brought up, they were crushed quickly. So it was in that time frame when that invasion was taking place that these assassinations, these killings in the jails took place, and overwhelmingly of MEK members, but also of other dissidents. And these were people who, in many cases, had been in jail for 8 to 10 years already when they were killed, and certainly had no capability of organizing in the outside and represented no threat to the Islamic Republic. No, I'm going to go back there. And then to you.
Quick ones. My name is Commander Jeremy Vaughn. I'm the Navy Fellow here at the Institute. And if Raisi wins, especially from your position at in CENTCOM, do you see the Iranian Republican Guard, more specifically the Iranian Republican Guard Navy, becoming more emboldened in the Straits of Hormuz and seeing more conflict if in the case of a Raisi win?
Of course, I'm not talking about on behalf of CENTCOM at all. I'm here as a visiting fellow. They have been very aggressive. As a matter of fact, on Monday, they came within feet of one of our ships at Strait of Hormuz. This is the latest of a series of this extremely aggressive behavior that they're showing. And is amazing that a few days before election they do that to show that Raisi type people stand up against the U.S. power and all of that. Yes, I do. Not because if Raisi wins, but just in itself. But Raisi victory is a consolidation of all the revolutionary militant forces in Iran. And atmospherics, at least, would help a lot to push those confrontation. And I'm not just worrying about the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf. I'm really worried about Bab al-Mandab as well. The Iranians are actually helping the Houthis, supplying them with arms and with missiles, anti-ship missiles, And the danger is that they don't even have that much control over Houthis as much as they have control over the Iraqi Shias or the Hezbollah in Lebanon. And if they decide to shoot a U.S. or allied ship, is going to be very extremely dangerous situation. And Bab al-Mandab, by the way, is as important as the Hormuz Strait for the free flow of commerce in that region. So yes, I do expect this provocation continue under Raisi, probably more so, not because of Raisi, but because the whole atmospheric inside the country has changed to favoring people like Raisi.
If I may add to that, if Raisi wins, he's got a problem. He has to show that he's different than Rouhani. And what he's promised in the course of the election is a variety of populist initiatives, which, as Jahangiri, Rouhani's assistant, who's now withdrawn, kept pointing out, says, you can't add. Sound familiar? And that what you're promising can't possibly be delivered. Right? Right, and Raisi's campaign has been based upon his distributing, in no small part, on his distributing large amounts of food in his capacity as the heads of the Mashhad Shrine. There's candidate Raisi, and then there's Mashhad Shrine Director Raisi. And Mashhad Shrine Director Raisi has quite coincidentally been distributing large amounts of aid packages to the poor, while candidate Raisi is running for president. Raisi's going to have a problem, which is he can't deliver on his domestic promises, and so it'll be tempting to think about some kind of foreign policy adventurism. But we frankly don't have a clue what he's going to do, because he has very little record in foreign policy. It's never an area that he's been involved in. And he doesn't seem to have any good pals who are involved in foreign policy, and the people identified as being close to him have not been particularly foreign policy experts. And it was much more Kalibov, who was the candidate of the Revolutionary Guards, not Raisi. So we don't have a clue what he's going to do. Mr. Pollard.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I'm Dave Pollack here at the Washington Institute. I was very intrigued by Nader's remark that if Raisi does not win, if Rouhani wins, that this will be a blow to the supreme leader's prestige and maybe even political power. And I want to ask two questions about that. And first is it possible that this is part of actually a very clever or cynical political game that Khamenei is playing, which is to pretend to be supporting at the last minute Raisi in order to be able to say afterwards, you see, I let the people have their way. You see, the system actually works. You see, we can be, all you reformers, you can be content that you really do have a choice. Kind of like what happened with Khatami when he ran for the second term. It's just, I don't know how you could prove it one way or the other, but I'm just trying to imagine this kind of reverse conspiracy theory. But the second question is, if you're right, is it possible that, because I kind of think that Rouhani is going to win. It's just my guess. That
put your money where your mouth is.
Okay, sure, yeah. It's just based on precedent, that's sort of the pattern. They let the reformer win so that he's in a weaker position because blah, blah, blah. But anyway, is it possible that it's precisely in that case that in order to show that he has not been weakened, that the supreme leader will have to take a very hard line, both on domestic and foreign policy, to undercut Rouhani at every turn and to take a even more provocative position in foreign policy so that his base of the extremists, the militants, the revolutionaries understand that he's still really the one in charge, even though Rouhani was able to eke out a victory in the election.
I went first.
That's what also happened with Khatami, I think, in his second term.
David, the very nature of your questions, which shows how this competition in Iran provides the Iranian authorities with so many different avenues to fool people and to advance their revolutionary policies. So that the system of having a more moderate face and more hardline face has been a real winner in many ways for the Islamic Republic, in both domestically and internationally. It's so important that we keep our eye on the bigger picture of recognizing what's going on here. Is that all parties concerned are really quite committed to the revolutionary goals. During the Obama administration, the constant refrain from Undersecretary Wendy Sherman was that Rouhani is no moderate. Rouhani is completely dedicated to this system. And she was very eloquent about that. And I mean, frankly, her bosses, both Secretary Kerry and President Obama, would say that from time to time. But Wendy really internalized this. And I think that that's a absolutely correct viewpoint. I mean, Rouhani spent, after all, some 20 years as the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, and he really is a product of the system. And so a lot of his differences with others is whether or not you get what you want by smiling or snarling. Right? Do you blow smoke in people's face, or do you spit in their face? And it's not so much a difference over objectives.
Any conspiracy theory doesn't surprise me in Iran. That's for sure. Even anti-conspiracy theory, as you said.
Well, by the way, there's the wonderful comment of why is it that Iranians are so prone to conspiracy theories? And the answer is because they're so prone to conspiracies.
However, if Raisi loses, he cannot pull up. Khamenei cannot pull off another of those conspiracy theories. If Raisi loses, people understand that the guy couldn't pull off a victory for Raisi. I think that will be the bottom line. No matter how they're going to spin it, that's going to be the bottom line. He could not even pull off this election for him. On Khamenei, on the foreign policy, however, I really believe that Khamenei has been very consistent, highly predictable when it comes to foreign and military policy, especially in the region. And the good thing about Khamenei, he keeps telling all of us publicly what he plans to do, what his strategy is for the region, what his strategy is for Syria, for Iraq, for anybody who wants to hear. He keeps telling us that, and he has been highly predictable, and really not much surprises has come from him. So no matter if it's Raisi or Rouhani, he's going to follow that line until he can. Although, as one of our colleagues mentioned, his health really is deteriorating, and we don't know how far he has to go. But at least sometimes it's good to have a predictable hardliner than a non-predictable somebody who doesn't know what's going on in that region.
No, I enjoyed listening to you, but the conspiracies, yes, I think that having both, I agree with Patrick that both having moderate and conservatives gives a nice legitimacy stamp to the Islamic Republic of Iran. But there are real differences too, especially when it comes to minorities, especially when it comes to women, the cultural attitude that is more the ambience that is that will take over the country, and a way to counter the ultra conservative forces and the attack that they usually have on women in working places. Paying attention to environmental issues, because these are real issues and they do have real effects. Let's not forget that. But in terms of foreign policy, it's I agree. It's all within the power of the supreme leader and, unfortunately, the ultra-conservative factions. But I also think that the Sepah and Basij rank and files are also changing. We should also keep in mind that they're coming to an age where there would be less and less commanders-in-chief who were there 40 years ago. And there are some changes happening in Sepah and Basij as well, and their proxies in the region.
Yeah, but I don't think they're all good. I mean, let me give you an example. 10 years ago, in the aftermath of the 2006 Israeli-Hezbollah war, there was a lot of resentment in Iran about the resources that were being devoted to rebuilding South Lebanon. and complaints about why they're rebuilding South Lebanon, but they're not rebuilding the earthquake devastated city of Bam in Iran. Today, I don't see that. I don't see any complaints whatsoever coming from anybody on the liberal side about the Iran's involvement in Syria. Quite the contrary, I would say that Iran's involvement in Syria is broadly popular, and that the regime's argument that this is a forward defense of Iran against these brutal Daesh, ISIS people who would otherwise threaten Iran itself, and it's a defense against terrorists who would attack shrines. I think that's widely accepted. Mm-hmm. And so I'm part of the new nationalism in Iran is indeed, I think, a broader support for Iran's assertive role abroad. Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of the reason why that assertive role has not been a campaign issue is because it's a reasonably popular policy. It's not just because it's everyone recognizes that the president has no say over it and that the supreme leader is in charge. I just also think it's a reasonably popular policy. Mm-hmm. Please wait a second for a microphone, because otherwise the people behind you won't hear you. It's coming your way. Right here in front.
I don't have a question, but I worked with Rouhani until I was fired by him himself. So my experience, 31 years, I was fired. Yeah, I was a university professor at the University of Tehran, and then when I was fired from University of Tehran, then he fired me from Center for Strategic Studies. Oh. So
Twice, two.
No, I mean two with Ahmadinejad from University of Tehran, and he from, let's say, Center for Strategic Studies. As a matter of fact, I was, the person who worked for the, let's say, that what you say, the constructive interaction versus confrontation. And when it was published, they were all against me. So they gathered, they collected all the books from this, First of all, I have been in Iran. I am not political, but I go to Iran. But when I go over there, okay, they dismiss me, but they don't arrest me. They just interrogate me many times. First of all, I see that Trump has really influenced the election. Raisi was not to be nominated. Prior to this, Khamenei asked Larijani to get ready for becoming the next leader, and that is why then he asked him, he assigned him to be, the chair of the Imam Sadiq University, so that to be more educated. And so because they are really very close to Khamenei. So it has the impact. I was invited to a talk. When I was talking to them, so they canceled my second talk in Iran because I said that this is dangerous. Second, Rouhani and Raisi, both of them are within the system. Rouhani is not reformist. He is really authoritarian bureaucrats. He is, he loves Khamenei, but he follow him, but he is associated with Rafsanjani. I could divide them. That Rouhani is the bureaucratic authoritarian part of the regime, and Raisi is the military part of the regime. So both of them are within the system. So I believe do not. I
think we all agree.
Yeah. I worked with them. Many of them have been my students. Even ministers, 3 ministers now have been my students over there. And then, Khamenei, for Khamenei, Rouhani is good for one way and Raisi for the other. If America started that way, now they are talking about this with 17 Arab countries to get a NATO against Iran, so Raisi would serve. And that is, very dangerous. And I'm very scared of that. But Raisi, most reformers have been my students, and they are against Raisi, and they try to publicize over the massacre that he has. And he was not a figure. Nobody knows him. Nobody knows him prior to that. He was only in judiciary. But if he comes, then I believe that because he's representing, the military and revolutionary court, I'm scared that brinkmanship goes, and there would be inadvertent war, because the regime would be saved by that. If talks did not work, let's fight. With fight. War is good for them.
Well, one thing you said that I certainly will agree with is that I think an awful lot of the people who are voting for either Raisi or Rouhani are voting against the other guy, and that this is not an election in which necessarily people are that excited about the candidate they're going to vote for. But we've been used to that. It's been known to happen here.
I just want to say something. If I've been good in concealing my anxiety, let me use this opportunity to reveal that it's very anxiety provoking. And it's, I agree with you. I think both of them are part of a system. Raisi, I would say that is not necessarily representing a military faction because he was the judge of those trials. But I think there is justifiable anxiety over the future of the country. There could very well go into war. And Tangei Hormuz has always been a very contentious place because it only takes an accident, right? And it doesn't take much to incite war in that region, and it blocks all the oil. The oil prices will shoot up, and it will be like an earthquake in the region. So yes, I think it's a very anxiety-provoking times, especially with having Trump as our president here, when confrontations can come out of the blue, I feel like. But I just want to make a distinction that Rouhani has, as I said in my presentation, is not embodying the hopes of the reformists. And there are more and more of the Green Revolution people and those who participated in those uprising and those protests are now backing Rouhani up, and the election is the choice between the bad and the worse, obviously. So in this case, but Rouhani, with Rouhani, at least there is a chance of balancing this act and having more of the ta'amul, as you also said. In terms of the policies in Syria, I think that it's not much talked about, and I don't think it's necessarily popular. I think it is popular in Iranian politics and among the ordinary people to build cities and to help the poor in Palestine, in Lebanon, but I don't think the regime's involvement in Yemen or Syria is necessarily popular. I think but nobody talks about it. You can't talk about it. There is no public venue to talk about this. But I don't think it's complementary to national Iranian pride to say that, yes, we're involved in Yemen, or yes, we're involved with Bashar Assad. But it is popular to say we are against Daesh. And that they do stand against Daesh, because Daesh and Taliban represents to Iranians the worst of Islam, and in that way, I think it's complementary to their national pride, and also presents a common factor with the international community to have some negotiations, because they do have common objectives when it comes to Daesh, Taliban, and these deadly forces in the region.
Well, I certainly hope you're correct. Well, I think the time has come, unfortunately, for us to end this, in time for you all to come up and bet with me. But first, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us what percentage of the vote do you think that Rouhani will get on Friday? And I want a number. I don't want a lot. I want a number. What percentage will Rouhani get on Friday?
Why don't you start?
I'll start. I think that Rouhani is going to get 45% of the vote on Friday.
So you think they'll go to the second round?
I'm not sure. I think that the Rouhani will get 45% of the vote.
45. Okay,
Right.
so then he would.
I just asked what percentage will Rouhani get?
My question. Rouhani will not get less than 45%, I agree. Probably about 46, 47%. But I expect him to lose. The way in the past few days it's happening. Although this is just a speculation. you can never say who's going to win or who's going to lose.
You're saying lose in the second round.
Oh, well, with everybody going out, there's only 2 people left. There's not going to be, by definition, a second round. Really, it's two.
I can collect my money now.
You can cash your money right now.
I think Rouhani, don't quote me on this, but I think Rouhani will win with more than 51%.
So last time around, he got slightly under 51%. So you think he's going to improve from last time. So it's going to be very hard for him to win the first round with less than last time because he got 50.8% last time. So, well, anyway, you all won because you listened to an interesting and entertaining discussion and better informed on Friday. Thank you for coming. Elham, I think as I wrote you.